Hello, my friends, and welcome back to Meerkat Musings. Welcome back to the Meerkat Muse. Welcome to a long overdue Meerkat Muse posting, which, if you've ever followed Meerkat Musings at all, you basically sort of know is a 2-week summary of my life. So sometimes it's not very exciting, sometimes I think it's reasonably exciting, and sometimes I hope it brings up some talking points. Now, the talking points for me over the span of the last couple of weeks basically revolve around a trip into London and a surprising act of intelligence on my part, you might say, and we'll kind of start there. Basically, without going into loads and loads of kind of gory detail, I've had a bit of an issue with, I think it's acid reflux, and not going to lie, I was actually worried it was something more serious. And so I actually did the unthinkable. I geared myself up for a trip to the doctor to have a chat, have a couple of tests. It's not the sort of thing that I wanted to do because, I'll be honest, I was afraid of getting some potentially bad news, and no one wants to get bad news. But I've made myself go along because at the end of the day, I have a responsibility to my family to make sure that I'm still here in the next sort of, year, 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years. I need to make sure I'm still here for my loved ones. And ignoring what my body is telling me is a surefire way of making sure I'm not still here. And in the end, there were no major concerns. I had a blood test done, which was interesting. I'm actually still sporting a pretty big bruise from that now. And they ruled out a bunch of things, and it would seem that there were no red flags, there were no immediate, obvious sources of concern and worry. So great, brilliant, fantastic. And I'm not perhaps stressing over some of these worries as much now, because, not going to lie, I was a bit anxious about one or two things, and subsequent to everything, I feel a bit relieved, which is great. I'm not feeling quite so tense, and that's always great, isn't it? I mean, running around feeling tense doesn't tend to do anybody any favours. So a touch more relaxed, so to speak, which is great. Either side of this kind of experience, we had a trip to London during half term, and half term and London equates to the place being quite busy, which can't be helped. It's the nature of the game. But my wife, daughter and I, we went to London's Natural History Museum. My wife and daughter were going for a specific reason. They were going for a pop-up Pokemon shop. It was a ticketed event, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get a ticket myself, so they went along and did that while I kind of milled around outside for a bit, and then we did the museum for a bit. It's quite fascinating. Natural History Museum, it's free to enter, which is always great, and you can leave donations, of course you can, but it's open to the public basically at any point, and you can wander around and absorb the amazing history of our world, and you can sort of see what the natural world has to offer and what it's brought to us in so many different ways. I mean, you had ancient kind of like sort of proto-human remains going back hundreds of thousands of years, if not more. You had stuff about dinosaurs, of course you do, and loads of stuff to do with the kind of various natural minerals and ores and metals that have kind of played a fundamental role, really, in building up human civilization. It's all quite fascinating stuff. It's also kind of a draining experience because it's half term, so it's busy. And I, for one, don't tend to have a lot of patience with being jostled around and manoeuvred by crowds, which I wouldn't say got worse necessarily as the day went on, but once we left the Natural History Museum and began the the second phase, if you like, of our London experience. We wound up in Covent Garden, we wound up in a couple of like sort of Japanese shops, and again, while they weren't overly busy, there was lots of, for me, milling about, kind of trying to manoeuvre out of people's way and feeling like I was constantly being manoeuvred, which didn't particularly wow me or thrill me. But there wasn't a lot I could do about that, unfortunately. It's the nature of the game, so to speak. So that was a little bit, not gonna lie, a little bit stressful. In these shops held a great deal of interest for my daughter and to a degree my wife, but for me, there was really no interest in it for me. We briefly popped our heads into Forbidden Planet, which is basically sci-fi mecca on Tottenham Court Road, but not for long because, again, that was quite busy. And one, didn't particularly like that. My daughter didn't particularly like that. Again, it's half term, and it's also just a, generally speaking, popular store with nerds and geeks like myself. So it gets quite busy. But you just have to kind of endure this to a point. And then we wolfed down at McDonald's and we were on to the next stage of our mission. I had hoped we might have the chance to do something a little bit more sophisticated than McDonald's, but time got away from us a little bit, and we had to be at a place called I think it was the Underbelly Boulevard, was it? A venue in Soho, because we were going to go see a magic show, and we were going to see Dynamo. Now, Dynamo is a rather brilliant magician who's done so many amazing sort of tricks and feats down the years on TV. And, to be fair, he did a few on stage in front of us. There were a few that I couldn't help but feel depended upon audience participation. I just don't see any other way for how these things could have been done. I could be wrong. I mean, I don't know for certain in any way, shape or form how he pulled off some of these things. And some of it was just mesmerising and baffling and quite incredible, really, to be honest. So, a great little watch. That was at 7 o'clock, went on to about sort of 20 past 8, roughly. And then we were on our way home again. It was a long day because we got into London. Basically, we left the house around about, I think, 10 o'clock, half 10. So it was a very long day, lots of walking around, and then we didn't get home until about gone 10 o'clock. So I was a tired meerkat, to put it mildly. I'm definitely feeling my age in respect of that sort of thing. I'm not cut out for long days being bustled around London. Sometimes what I would like to do is really kind of do this sort of thing on my terms, but I kind of accept that isn't really going to happen these days. It's not a case of doing things on my terms at this point in my life. And I think I, broadly speaking, accept that as it is. The thing about the following day, the Wednesday, is that was the day of my blood test, and it was set for 20 past 8 in the morning, 8:25. So there was no lie-in for me. It was a case of an alarm. Well, it was also bin day. Wednesday's bin days in my neck of the woods. So up early to do the bins and then head up for my blood test. So no rest for the wicked whatsoever. And then it was a case of getting home reasonably quickly because I had my parents coming down to see us, which is always quite pleasant. They brought pizza, they brought chocolate, they brought beer. I really can't argue with any of those three things, to be fair. And then spending Wednesday afternoon just basically doing as little of anything as possible, which is really, to me, in many respects, my ideal day off. I don't particularly want to be busy on days off. I want peace, I want quiet. Sometimes that's all this meerkat needs to be very, very content. And I'm going to need that because, without going into too many details, the situation at work is such that for the month of March, we will be reduced to 2 people. And I will therefore be shouldering some extra burdens, including the deeply unwanted burden of doing conference calls, of which I've already had some practice at doing. I think conference calls over sales figures are, to be honest, absolutely meaningless. It's just a way of feeling very self-conscious about how your store has or hasn't performed in front of everyone else. It's like standing up in class to say, oh, I didn't do very well at this project, or alternatively, having to listen to people brag about how brilliant they are. It's I don't know what the exercise is for. I don't know what the benefit of it is, but it's certainly something that I can do without. Unfortunately, it's something I'm going to be doing more of. I'm also going to be doing more in the way of loan trading in the immediate future, which doesn't, to be fair, dismay me. Subject to circumstances, I actually don't mind loan trading sometimes. Not all the time, by any means, and there will be circumstances where it will undoubtedly prove to be either stressful or boring, subject to circumstances. But overall, it's not the biggest chore in the world, and as long as you make sure that you've got food with you, which is an absolute must, of course, then you usually sort it, and then you just have to keep yourself hydrated, and you can find things to do. You always can. So that's going to be basically the month of March. But did anything else happen at the end of February? Well, I've made some small progress with a couple of the stories that I'm working on. The story I'm working on with my brother-in-law, we've made a bit of progress with that, just over 27,000 words. I have almost cracked the 10,000 word point with another story that I'm developing, which is part 2 of an upcoming book. So basically, book 1 for this latest series, that's in the wings already with the publisher. Book 2 is what I'm developing now, all part of a wider story, and basically what I am terming my multiverse saga, although I won't necessarily call it the multiverse saga. I'm not actually sure what to call it, but this is what I'm developing, and book 2 is what I'm currently working on alongside my brother-in-law's and I's project. So that's all bubbling away, and I'm putting out feelers for other ideas. Speaking of putting out feelers in a loose kind of sense, my daughter encouraged me to get a new game for the PlayStation called UFOphilia, which I will say now is absolutely terrifying. The idea is you wander around various locations in the dark, trying to figure out what kind of creepy alien is stalking any given property. And then once you think you know what it is, you can set bait and traps and try and take photos of it. You need to get 4 photos. Well, you don't need to get 4 photos, but you need to get some photos of this alien. But whilst you're doing this in photo mode, you are vulnerable to being abducted, which can mean an alien, often a stereotypical sort of grey alien, right in your face as it abducts you. I have screamed and squealed on several occasions playing this game, and my daughter absolutely loves that. But you know what? It's one of the ways in which my daughter and I bond. We bond over experiences like this. You might say it's our love language in a way. And it's a lot of fun, to be fair, even if I'm pretty certain my wife can't stand the fact that we both sit there playing this game and we both sit there leaping out of our skins when this game proves to be terrifying. But it's a laugh, and it's something that we do together, which is always quite nice. And yeah, it's a bit of fun of an evening. Some of the levels are almost like labyrinths, and some of the levels, the aliens will actually spawn almost right on top of your spawn zone, which makes those levels rather frustrating. But it's a fun little way of whittling away some time. So I guess broadly then, that's more or less everything covered for this particular edition of the Meerkat Muse. I don't know as and when I'll do another video Meerkat Muse. I will aim to. We'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, please check out meerkatmusings.co.uk if you would prefer to read a far more coherent and structured post rather than this video. Although, of course, if you're hearing that, you're at the end of the video. So, oh well. But yeah, please like and subscribe if you've enjoyed. and stay tuned for more. Take care, everyone. Until next time.